fazendo silêncio aí. Bom. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Sematron. It is my honor to introduce today our distinguished speaker, Professor Dr. Stefano Mintchev, Assistant Professor at Environmental Robotics at ETH Zurich, Switzerland. Professor Mintchev has made remarkable contributions to flying robotics during his academic career and co-founded Foldway Haptics. His current research focuses on using robots to address critical challenges such as sustainability, climate change, and biodiversity. Today he will present a lecture titled From Nature to Nature, Monitoring Biodiversity with Bio-Inspired Drones, exploring how nature-inspired drone technology can help monitor and preserve our planet's biodiversity. So please join me in welcoming Professor Stefano Mintchev.
Okay, well, hello everybody, and thanks a lot for the introduction. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here with you today. This is also the 20th anniversary of the conference, so you should be very, very proud of this. So, huge congratulations for this. And this also made me think. So, what I was doing 20 years ago, I was already doing robotics or not? And not actually. So I was very happy. I said, "Oh, I'm pretty young, so not 20 years that I'm working in robotics, but actually it's just 19 years." So this is a young me on the very left side of this picture. On the this was our very first experience in with robots. It was 25. We were in Japan doing a competition with. This very tiny robot, 1 inch square robots that had to move in this maze autonomously. And well, this is how I started. And what I was very passionate about was sort of an interface between nature and technology. So I started to work on bio-inspired system. Specifically, how can we use animal as a model to develop better robots? At the beginning, it was mostly underwater robots, so using fish-like propulsion to swim more efficiently or more quiet compared to propeller-driven vehicles. And after that, I moved to Switzerland, where I actually started to work on drones. 2014 was probably the beginning of this big hype on aerial system. And as you can see there, I was still pretty interested in nature and, for example, developing drones with morphing wings so that we can have a more extended flight envelope, or soft drones that can withstand collisions like the wings of insects, or that can fold in mid-air to explore very cluttered environment for search and rescue applications. And then I went 2 years in my company. I founded with a friend, and we were actually very lucky to develop this bionic flap for a Mercedes show car that was presented in Las Vegas in 2020, just before pandemic. So we were very lucky that this actually took place. And after that, I actually decided to come back to academia. And one of the things that I started to ask myself is, okay, so what will be the impact of robots in the next 10, 20, 30 years? So what robots will do? And I think that they will be very active in the field of sustainability and climate change, because these are the defining challenges of our time. You and me will need to find solution to this very, very rapidly. And I think that robots will be part of this solution. So that's actually what we're doing in my lab. So we really try to understand how robots can help us to achieve a more sustainable future. And today I will mostly focusing on how we are developing drones that can operate in forest to monitor biodiversity. Now, why we are interested in biodiversity, or actually what is biodiversity first? So biodiversity is life on this planet in all its complexity. So it's about species diversity, it's also genetic diversity, diversity of ecosystems and functions. But what is very important to understand is that biodiversity is foundational. So many services and products that we sort of give for granted every day are possible thanks to biodiversity. For example, if you think about pollination or soil fertility, these are fundamental for food production. Forests are relevant for CO2 sequestrations, but also for example, providing buffer against natural events. And the main problem is that in the past 20, 30 years, we've been eroding this foundation at an unprecedented rate. And as you can see from this very clear image, we are reaching a tipping point where everything can sort of collapse. And even if we are there at the very top, also, of course, our life is pretty much at risk. So what we need to do is to try to have very accurate data on biodiversity at relevant ecological and political scale to make decisions and to restore biodiversity on this planet. And this is where is the main challenge, that is very complex to measure biodiversity, because biodiversity is very complex, actually. Traditional techniques involves ecologists that goes in the field, spend maybe weeks there with binoculars, observing, I don't know, birds or mammals. Sometimes they have to climb on trees very high, which is very dangerous. Sometimes they are sweeping net in the field to collect insects, so it's something which is extremely labor intensive. Also, the species that are collected needs to be identified, so you need a lot of expertise, and it's very hard to get this expertise in the field. Is also something that is very specific, so when you apply one technique, it's okay for one type of animals, but not for other, and most of the time is highly invasive. So here is an example which is called fogging, so it basically is insecticide that is spread in the canopy, and then all the insects are killed and are collected in this net. So what does it mean this concretely? If you look at this graph here, each dot represents a measure of biodiversity in a certain radius for a certain amount of years. And concretely, with traditional technique, we don't have enough data. Only 11% of land is covered with data. So here, this is Brazil, rainforest, one of the most biodiversity-rich environment on this planet. We have almost no information because it's not accessible. So this constrains our capability to measure this environment. And the other problem is that we have a very biased picture. So there are some species that are easy to detect, while others no, and so all our observations are just for a few species, but we fail to capture the entire complex and accurate picture. And so our hypothesis is that by using robots, we can collect this data with extremely high spatial and temporal resolution and with better accuracy. And this is what I will actually show you today. And so since we are engineers, we like to see graphs and diagrams. So we have the traditional techniques, which are here, the field survey, very labor-intensive, human-based solutions. And what we want to do, we want to increase the number of measures, both in space and time. And we also want to have more accurate, so increase the number of species that we can detect. And so this is something that we can do with robots. Robots are an excellent platform to carry and transport sensors, like, for example, cameras or microphones. So we can use drones to extend the range of our measures, but even to reach location that human cannot do. And so we'll start from this first thing. So using basically drones to survey for example, animal populations. So these are some examples at sea, in very dense forest, or in extreme environment, very cold, where people don't usually like to be. So here they were monitoring the population of penguins. And what you can see in the past 10 years, when we use these drones, we see that we transition from very large and heavy platforms that required a catapult to take off, so it's a very unpractical solution, to systems that are significantly lighter, so they are more transportable, they're more affordable, but we have we paid something here, so there is a significant decrease in the flight time. And so this is actually one of the first problems that we have been starting to tackle, is how can we make drones that are lightweight, very portable, so to be used in the field very effectively, but can fly for a very long time. And so, in fact, what you can see is that in general, size matters in drones, in the sense that we have basically the mass of the vehicle is affecting significantly the flight time. This is true for all types of drones, for flapping wings, for rotorcraft, and for fixed wings. This is because for vehicles that are smaller than 100 grams, they fly at very low, it's a Reynolds number, and the low efficiency, together with the high sensitivity to atmospheric turbulences, limits the flight time. So what is atmospheric turbulences? Well, basically these are velocity fluctuation or vortices that are caused by unsteady atmospheric conditions, are also very common in the wake of obstacles. So whenever you fly, for example, in an urban environment or in a forest, there are plenty of these effects. And so our goal was to try to explore whether we can make very small and portable aircraft, very lightweight, so they are safe for people, they have very low noise, so they don't disturb the animals, but they can fly significantly longer than 30 minutes. And so I mentioned that these two problems are kind of connected. So what is happening is that at low Reynolds number, the atmospheric turbulence variation cause a significant lift variation. What is happening is that at low atmospheric turbulence, usually the airflow low Reynolds is very high chance that is detaching from the airfoil, creating an open separation bubble. But what is happening is that when there is high atmospheric turbulence, the fluid gets some energy, if you want, and tends to reattach. So it's a closed separation bubble. And so this is a high lift condition, this is a low lift condition. So what is happening is that when the atmospheric turbulence is fluctuating, also the lift that is produced by the wing is fluctuating, which is a big problem because then the drones start to oscillate and there can be also some mechanical problem into this. And so how people have solved this problem is basically to operate above this threshold, which is possible, but only by using, or mostly by using these aircraft that have very short wing, and these very short wing are very inefficient from an energy point of view. In fact, if you think about gliders, so these airplanes that fly without motors, they have super long wing, they have aspect ratio around 8, 9, if not 10. And so basically, the problem here is that conventional wing design cannot achieve simultaneously both aspects, so high energy efficiency and the resilience to turbulences. And if we look why, one of the reasons is that the design of the wings of the airfoils of these small aircraft follows the same paradigm that we use for a jumbo jet. So we have this very streamlined shape, and the goal is to try to keep the airflow as much as possible attached to the airfoil, which is excellent for this vehicle, of course, but not so much for this instead small system. And in fact, when we look at the wing of insects of birds, what we notice is that they have a very much corrugated airfoil with very sharp geometries, and this sharp geometry is actually fostering the separation of the flow. And by doing so, this makes this process quite, let's say, quite consistent, and is what allows these animals to fly in very complex atmospheric conditions. And so together with my friend Matteo, was at the time a PhD in Brown University, together with Professor Brouwer, we developed a new principle, a new type of wings. We call it this flow-separated wing, which seems quite heretical, but the idea is that we have a very sharp leading edge that causes the detachment of the airflow, and this then attaches back to the flap here. And what is very interesting is that by forcing this separation, we make these very consistent. So almost insensitive to external atmospheric turbulences. And this means that now we can integrate this airfoil in very long wing and achieve the efficiency that we want. So here you see actually the characterization of this airfoil in a wind tunnel. You see our wing compared to an airfoil which is commonly used for these small aircraft. And what you can see is that our airfoil has a much more consistent performance when the atmospheric turbulence is changing. And this is basically the result. So when you implement it in an airplane, you can fly for 170 minutes, which is 5 times more than actually other drones can do. So this is almost 3 hours on a single battery charge, which is quite impressive. And now what we're doing, since they're also very small aircraft, they don't produce noise, a lot of noise. We are integrating microphones so we can record, for example, the sound of birds or insects, and so we can monitor these species. And so this is one example of how we can, in principle, use drones to extend our capacity to monitor. The other one is actually the use of drones to deploy sensors, for example, in canopies or in forests that are that are not accessible. So this is the work that Christian is doing. He's one of the PhD of the lab, and he developed this gripper that can attach to branches, and then in this box here you can add some sensors to monitor different environmental parameters, so it can be a camera or it can be a microphone. What is very interesting about this gripper is that we use a grasping approach, which is called coiling. This is also very common in nature. You see that animals usually they wrap their tail and their tongue around branches or leaves. The reason is that this sort of coiling makes the system very capable to adapt to diameter of different sizes. And since it's also coiling, it's building up a lot of friction, so you have some sort of a capstan effect. So even very lightweight grippers, like for example 5 grams, can produce a quite significant holding force. And what you see here is implemented using a manufacturing technique which we call it's sort of like this paper folding system. We don't have any joint or traditional joint like with shaft and bearings, but we have folding joints like in paper folding system. And these joints are made using Kapton, and then we have tiles that are made with fiberglass. And the green part here, there we have a pre-stretched rubber bands. That is what, together with the folding pattern, this gives bistable behavior. So as soon as the gripper touches the branches, so it's trigger the transition and is coiling around the branch. And here we are implementing it on a drone. So here we are still teleoperating the drone, but basically it's pretty simple. So you align with the branch, and then you go up, and the gripper trigger, and it coils. And we also have actually a simple system to recollect the drone using some magnets that basically detach or release the rubber band, so there is no more tension, and the gripper soften for this. So here you see some example of what type of data we can collect. So here we deployed it for around 30 minutes, so we can collect different environmental parameters, but we can also collect sound. Let's see if you can hear it. Yeah. So this is a bioacoustic recording that we collected actually some weeks ago in the rainforest here in Manaus. And from there, we can use basically AI algorithms to identify birds or insects. Now we are doing some additional work. Of course, ideally, we don't want to teleoperate the drone, so we want the deployment to be autonomous. So here we are interested in trying to identify the network of branches while we are approaching the tree. So we're using AI network to detect this network of branches, even when they are when it is partially hidden by the vegetation, and we are so that we can plan where to deploy this gripper. And the other things we are doing, we are transitioning towards using more and more biodegradable systems. So ideally in the long term would be to deploy these sensors in the environment, and they are biodegradable, so they collect the data and then they simply biodegrade. So we don't even have to collect them again. Now we are, of course, starting by looking at what type of material we can use for the mechanical structure. So here you see some gelatin that we use to replace the rubber band, which is sort of dissolving after rain. But of course, there is also a lot of interest and a lot of work in the community looking also at biodegradable electronics and biodegradable actuators to even have more complex robotic functions into this system. Okay, this is some example of basically how we can, in principle, use robots to, survey or to deploy sensors, specifically cameras and microphones. But in general, all these systems are still allowing us to detect only few species. So in the sense that there will be always, very elusive animals that will not appear in our camera traps, or they're very silent, so we cannot hear their sound. And so what we want eventually to do is to also use techniques that allow us to detect more and more species, so to provide more accurate pictures. And this is the domain of environmental DNA. So it's a very new technology that is playing a very important role in the biodiversity monitoring domain. So what is environmental DNA? So what you need to know is that every animal and actually every living creature is shedding genetic material in the environment. So this DNA fragment that are accumulating and are persisting for a certain amount of time in the environment. This is happening because if you think about animals, they shed skin, saliva, feces, bloods. Also now we are breathing in this room, so we are actually releasing human DNA. And so whenever we collect a sample, for example, from water, or even just by swabbing the surface of trees, we can collect DNA and particle containing DNA, and this particle, this DNA can be extracted, and with technique that are very similar to the one that you use for COVID testing, can be amplified, and then we can basically associate these traces to the species they come from. And why this is very interesting? Well, it's very interesting because from a single sample we can detect, hundreds or thousands of species from all domains of life. So to really allow us to get a very accurate picture of biodiversity, especially also of species that are very elusive, and so they will anyway escape our traps, our nets, our cameras, or our microphones. Now the problem, or one of the challenge, still remain the collection of sample, which is still very manual operation. And it's very complex to do this, especially in hard to access environments, specifically in canopies and in forests, which are a hotspot for biodiversity. And so what we started to do together with our colleagues that have expertise in eDNA, we started to develop methods to use drones to collect this sample, specifically in canopies. And so this is our e-drone, and the way it works is basically by flying on a branch. So we actually teleoperate the drone, and as soon as it's above a branch, then we press a button, and the robot is landing and is stabilizing on the branch, is maintaining contact for around 10 seconds. And what you can see is that the cage has this sort of a flap, which is a sticky material that collects the DNA and DNA-containing particles that animals left in these on the branches. And once the collection is over, then we land, we take out the strip, we give the samples to our colleagues that process the material. And here what you see is actually a picture of the sort of a biodiversity that we detected around our lab in spring 2022 when we actually did our test in the field. Now, what is the complexity from a robotic point of view? So it's not kind of a super easy task to land on branches. The reason is that branches are not rigid, or they are compliant, and actually they have a compliance that can vary 3 orders of magnitude. So some of these perches are actually quite solid, so it's not a big problem. But some of them are very soft, and so they move, and it's also unclear if they can sustain the weight of the robots. And more importantly, this level of compliance is completely unknown to the robot, and just by looking at the branch, the robot cannot really estimate the level of compliance. And if you can see here in the video, also for birds is a pretty complex task, is a very actually reactive behavior that the birds is employing to land on branches. What it's doing is, since they cannot estimate the stiffness, then once it's on the branch, is using his legs, his haptic feedback to sort of try to perceive this level of stiffness, and then to sort of stabilize by using movement of his tail and wings. And this is also what we do with our drones. So we have this very large cage, which is sort of the end effector that the robot is using to interact with the branch. And this cage is connected with a load cell to the frame. So this allows us to measure the interaction force between the branch and the robot. And we use this information not only to detect when contact is happening, but also to stabilize the drone and to maintain the contact. And the reason why we have such a big cage or big end effector is because these allow us to be sort of be a bit more to be more robust against sort of uncertainties of alignment when we land, because you would see in the video that these branches, since they're soft, they also move, so it's pretty hard to really center them precisely. So with this big cage allow us to be to have a bit of more margin of error. And what you can see here is this eDNA collector material that gets squeezed in between the cage and the branch, and so this is how we basically then apply this force and this pressure that is helping us in the collection of the DNA material. So the strategy that we use is very simple, because we want to be quite robust. So we basically start to descend on the branch by asking the robot to following waypoints, so vertical waypoints. And as soon as we detect contacts here, we actually continue to descend on the branch. And we do this, and this is a very important step, because what we do, we are sort of leaning on the branch. So we are pushing on the branch, and especially for very soft branch, this is critical because basically this allows us to secure the branch on the drone. So if we don't do that, there is a pretty high risk that otherwise the branch will slip away from the drone. Instead, by pushing on it, we kind of also secure it with the drone. So we have a more sort of a stable contact. And then we have a very last step, which we call resting. And this is obtained by planning a last waypoint, which is a bit offset that allow the drone to tilt a bit and tilt opposite to the tilting on the branch, because this allows us to basically minimize the friction requirements to maintain the robots there. So it basically avoid the slipping the robots along the branch. So here you see some indoor tests that we do. So here on a very rigid branch, on a very soft branch. So you see that the behavior of the system is quite good, is comparable. Of course, when you have soft branches, we have a bit more of oscillations, while with rigid branches, they are a bit more stable. So as well, also the behavior of the robot is more stable, but still we have a very small oscillation in the order of 2 centimeters. You can see that we can also establish contact in different points of the cage, which is what we want. So we can actually land on different positions. And the force that we apply is around 1 Newton. Of course, when we land on soft branches, the force is a bit higher because we also have a lateral component of the force, which is caused by this large deflection of the branch. So this is how the procedure works outdoor. Okay, so we have the descent on the branch, and then we do the leaning on the branch. You see that everything is significantly more unstable because the branch is, of course, moving a lot due to the airflow, sometimes due to the wing. But as soon as we lean, then the relative motion between the drone and the branch is limited. We stay there for 10 seconds, and with the collector material, we take the DNA from the branches. So this is the results that we got from our collection test that we did in spring around our lab. So first of all, you see that we landed over 3 days on 7 different trees. So these were all different shapes, with or without leaves, with and without flowers. So it's quite robust landing techniques. We tested 2 types of collector materials. So one is tape, adhesive tape, so like the tape that you use in the office. This is also what is used in forensic investigation crime scene. So detectives use tapes to remove DNA from surfaces. So you have a sort of a sticky effect that collects particles. And the other material that we tested was gauze with a solution of water and sugar. So this gives a bit of stickiness to the water, but also water is helping in the transfer of DNA, because DNA is a hydrophilic molecule, so it's really facilitating the pickup of the DNA fragment. And so we were pretty happy about the results. So we detected 21 different taxa, not only insects, but we could also detect birds and mammals. So this was one of the first studies showing that. One of the things that you notice is that, however, that both materials collected eDNA, so they were both successful, but only once the same material, the same taxa was detected by the same material. So this means that we still have to understand much more about how the transfer of eDNA works from the substrate to the materials. And also probably also how the extraction of the genetic material is performed, because definitely this means that we have a biased picture depending on what type of material we use. And the other thing that you noticed is that there was actually a pretty heavy rain in the night between the second and the third day, and we have a pretty marked shift in the detection rate of this taxa. And this is because basically we know that water is basically washing out DNA. But this also means that most probably all these detections were associated to very recent animal activity, so which is pretty interesting. And it also tells us that why using robots is probably very relevant, because this means that we have to do this survey very, very often, because the life of DNA on vegetation is perhaps in the order of one couple of days or weeks, and is very susceptible to weather events. So we need to really to use drones to collect very often these signal to have a very good picture. So now, of course, we were very excited about these results, and we were actually capable to kind of collect eDNA on the outermost canopy regions. But one of the problems is that this drone cannot really access the innermost canopy region. So again, we don't have a complete sort of access to the entire tree, because of course flying inside the canopy is very challenging. You have very dense vegetation, extremely high risk of collisions. And so our next step was really to try to understand how we can penetrate these regions using drones. And so the way usually drones are operating in cluttered environment is by sensing and sensing obstacles and then planning trajectory to avoiding these obstacles. And this is now very effective also to operate in forests. You see there two examples. First example is a drone that is flying at 10 meters per second in forests, so it's very fast in doing that. The other example is a swarm of 10 or 20 robots doing this obstacle avoidance collectively. And so this technique works very well when you operate in sparse environments. But when you fly inside a forest, inside the canopies, and what you can see in this video is that at a certain point, of course, you can detect the obstacle, but the obstacles are so dense that there is no really possibility to avoid them. So the robot is sort of trapped, it's stuck there. So it detects the obstacle, but it cannot plan a trajectory to avoid these obstacles. However, if we think about this situation, we see that there are a lot of very small branches and twigs that are flexible. So in principle, we could traverse them by actually pushing them, so by what is called direct physical interaction. And this is exactly what we've been exploring, and what also animals, especially terrestrial animals, are doing to move in very cluttered vegetation. So what they do is basically they have a streamlined body, and using this streamlined body, they can really penetrate and push aside these flexible obstacles. And they do this also by triggering some specific maneuvers, like for example this sort of a twisting maneuver that helps to even better traverse these obstacles. It's a very tight sort of combination of body morphology, so this streamlined shape, and also some motion pattern that are used by cockroaches in this case. And so what we decided to do is to start also to explore this idea by using drones. So how drones can traverse compliant obstacles. And we started by a simple problem. So we have a single obstacle, which is sort of a flexible door, so sort of an hinged door with compliance here. And the goal is for the robot to move from one side to the other by sort of pushing this door. And now there are a couple of challenges that we need to address here. So first challenge is that actually the drone has to deal with different modes of interaction. So first mode of interaction is what we call pushing. So what happened is that the robot is moving forward and is pushing out the obstacles. And so what will happen is that basically the robot will sort of will deflect the obstacle, but the contact point between the obstacles and the robot will stay fixed. So we call this sort of a pushing mode of interaction. But what can also happen is that perhaps the robot cannot apply enough force to push on the obstacle, and so maybe it will slide on the obstacle. So what is happening in this case is that the obstacle is fixed, but the robot is sliding, and the point of contact between the obstacles and the robot is changing. And then there will be probably a third mode of interaction where the two previous modes are sort of coexisting. So the robot is a bit pushing and as well as is sliding on the obstacles. Now, the other challenge that we are dealing with is that in general we assume that the properties of the environments are unknown. So specifically, the robot doesn't know the level of compliance of the obstacles, and also doesn't know the friction between the body and the obstacles. And the other big challenge is that, of course, the point of contact between the robots and the environment and the obstacle is not constant, but is really moving on the body. So now this is a problem which is a problem of aerial physical interaction, so how robots can actually produce force in a controlled and stable way in the environment to produce meaningful outcome and tasks. And the classic way that this is solved is by using this type of robots. So these are the classic robots for aerial robots interaction. And what they do is you have basically an end effector that is sensorized usually with a force sensors. And already here you can see that this type of approach is not really properly working for us, because of course the interaction there, it's happening only on the tip, while for us, if you imagine to fly in a forest and traverse a vegetation, interaction must happen everywhere on the body, so we need to interact everywhere on the body. And the second thing is that most of these solutions, they heavily rely, I call them control-centric, because they heavily they make very strong assumption on the properties of the environment, on the response of the environment in order to maintain stability, in order also to transition from one mode to interaction to the other, so to define threshold to transition between different modes of interaction. But that's not something that we can use into our case. And so what we use is, what we start to explore is a more, what we call an embodied approach to aerial physical interaction, where we try to basically not leverage only on control and perception, but also on the body, on the physical properties of our drone. This is called embodied intelligence or mechanical intelligence. And so what we use, we have a circular body for the drone, so we can actually have interaction all along the body. We also have a low friction surface that allow us to really slide very effectively along the obstacles. And we have, again, a force sensor here, similar to the e-drone that I showed you before, that allow to measure force everywhere on this body. And this basically is very interesting because with a relatively simple controller, we can basically traverse these obstacles without having to have very strong assumption on contact model and also constraints. We have an automatic transition between the different modes of interaction, and we have also quite some capability to deal with different level of compliance. So this is how actually the system looks like. So we ask the drone to basically follow a trajectory, a straight trajectory to cross the obstacle. And basically what the robot is doing initially is pushing up the obstacle. So this is deflecting the obstacles, and then when it cannot deflect anymore, it starts to slide a bit on the obstacles, to move laterally, and then it starts the very last step, which is sort of this hybrid situation where it's sliding and it's pushing, and it's doing all of this without any specific information about the compliance or any specific threshold that tells the drone to transition from one mode of interaction to the other. The system here is quite robust, so we tested at compliance level that are 1 order of magnitudes apart, so from very low stiffness to higher stiffness. And what we can see is that we have very similar performance in terms of, so we can follow the straight trajectory quite effectively, so we have very limited error, position error. Of course, what we see is that the more the obstacle is stiffer, the more we need to push, and of course this means also inclining more the robots to apply more and more force. What we also do here is a sort of an ablation study to really look at how important is this sort of a synergies between morphology, perception, and control for the task. So what you can see here is that if we have a non-streamlined body, so a squared body instead of a circular cage, so the drone can push, but basically what is happening is that it's not sliding, so it gets stuck in this pushing condition. So it cannot traverse, of course, the obstacle. Here instead, when we have a streamlined body, but we don't have a low friction but a high friction shell, the robot instead tends to unstabilized because it's pushing, and then it's also not sliding, and this causes instabilities. And here instead, this is a robot without haptic feedback. So what is happening is that for very soft obstacles, you can still traverse, but without having the haptic feedback, eventually it will also unstabilize because it cannot basically dampen the reaction of the force that is produced by the hinged door and by the flap. And so, of course, we also done some very simple experiments with branches. So we started to experiment with it. And of course, this is a drone that is not fully enclosed, fully protected. So we can only interact with branches that are vertical. Otherwise, they tend to enter inside the propellers, and then, of course, the drone will eventually crash. But what we can see is a significantly more complex situation because we don't have this marked sort of push sliding, but everything is really actually mixed. So we have this sort of a push and sliding behavior that the drones has to handle. And of course, this is not the end of this project, because eventually, when you think about a condition like this, you have to handle multiple interaction, not only single point interaction. And so this is a bit our next challenge. You see here a bit some very preliminary experiments that we've done in a simulator. And what is the problem here is that there are situations where the robots can handle the traversal, but there are other situations where the robot is getting stuck. And the reason why it's getting stuck is mostly because, of course, by being able to measure only the force that is resulting from the multiple interaction, you cannot understand where is the direction of less stiffness. So the robot cannot understand which obstacle is less compliant, so it cannot replan a path in order to move towards the direction of less compliance. And so what now we are exploring is how can we develop some multi-contact sensing capacity, so some haptic sensors that can detect contacts everywhere on the body of the robot. And the approach that we are using is called optical tactile sensing. And so these are sensors that basically use cameras in order to measure basically the deformation that are happening on a soft skin. Usually, the soft skin is, there are markers, okay, so when the skin, when a force is applied to the skin, then there is a deformation of these markers, and this is what the camera see, and the marks are tracked, and it's possible to basically estimate the contact location, 3D force feedback, and also the textures of the contact. And these sensors are actually used very much in grasping and also for tasks like, of course, manipulation, because they provide this very rich haptic feedback that normal force sensors like load cell or pressure sensor cannot produce. And we are exploring how to integrate them into drones. And we actually started by, first of all, making them larger. So most of these systems are very small. They are used on the fingertip, so they are very, very, very small in terms of size. So we are actually making them very, very big, so that we can cover a large portion of our robots. Of course, we are trying to make them very lightweight because we need to integrate them into drones. So we have all of structures, while these other systems, usually they are entirely filled with silicons. And this also means that we have also a different illumination system so that we can illuminate very effectively these markers so that they are very visible by the camera, so that can be tracked very, very effectively. And so this is our first prototype, which measures around 3 Newton of force and has a spatial resolution of 2 centimeters. So we can basically detect 2 obstacles that are 2 centimeters apart. And here we started a bit to work with them. So we integrated on a drone. So we have some online computing on the force, and we show here some of very preliminary tasks. So here, for example, the drone is landing on 2 branches. One is softer and the other one is stiffer. So it's measuring the compliance, and then is sort of a landing then on the most stiffer perch. And here instead is a mapping task where the robot is sort of mapping the environment. So it's landing on different perches, and every time it lands, it sort of can detect where the obstacle is, and eventually it will make a map of the environment. And so this is basically. So now we are exploring these sensors with, of course, the idea to integrate it on our drones to have a more richer haptic interaction and eventually fly in very cluttered environment by exploiting this physical interaction to traverse the forest or to penetrate very deeply inside this environment. Okay, the last instead topic that I would like to cover is how then we are also transitioning from a single tree to actually 1 hectares of forest that we want to survey with biodiversity. Of course, we are very happy of these results, but then concretely, what these drones allow us to do is to sample 7 trees in 72 hours, which is good, but then when you look at the scale at which we have to operate, this is of course not enough. Our goal here is to sample 100 hectares. These are roughly 100,000 trees in 24 hours, so we want to be very fast. What does it mean, this concretely? So it means that we need to significantly boost the technology readiness level of our system. So these are prototypes. They are good for proof of concept. They operate in the lab. They allow us to test very cool scientific questions. But we also need to deploy them in the environment, in the real environment, if we want to have an impact and really collect actionable data in that. And so we need to increase the technology readiness level. And so we need new platforms, but what is interesting is that we can leverage everything that we learned, the fundamental principle of how we collect the DNA, of how we interact with the vegetation, this concept of mechanical intelligence or embodied intelligence, and transfer it to our new prototype. And the reason why we are doing this and why we started to do this is actually these competitions that aims to develop technology for rapid assessment of biodiversity. This is a competition that started 2020, And really, the goal is to survey 100 hectares in 24 hours of rainforest. So this is one of the most complex environments where you can operate drones, because it's super cluttered, it's very humid, it's very hot. So it's really, really challenging. And the other big challenge is that we have only 48 hours to process the data. Just to give you an idea, the eDNA analysis of the e-drone took 3 months. This was 2 years ago. So now we are pushing to do this in just 48 hours in the jungle. So this is the team that I am co-leading together with my colleague. It's called ETA Biodiversity. So we have 50 members from 14 different countries. And now we are competing in the finals that will take place in Manaus in roughly 1 month. So we are competing 11th of July. Actually, there are 6 teams that are competing. There are also a team from here, from Brazil, that is taking part in this competition. And what I would like to show you is some of the work that we have done in the semifinals that instead took place last summer in Singapore, where the X Prize asked us to survey these 60 hectares of forest in the middle of Singapore. So here you see where our drones took off and some of the trajectory that the drones performed to collect data. So this is our approach. So we use actually, or we used at the time, three types of drones. So we focused on drones that can, in this way, very safely fly above the canopy. We do not take any risk for this competition here. But still, they use probe, and I will show you later, to penetrate inside the different layers, the different strata of the canopy, so to collect data really everywhere, from the very top up to the soil. Our colleagues from Delft University, they developed this perching drone that can land on branches. And so they were then shutting down the drone and using microphones to record the sound. And then we had colleagues from Aarhus University that developed this terrestrial rover. So it's basically a rugged RC car that can operate on the ground and also collect eDNA, but also stay out at night with lights and attract insects, and with camera in this way detect these insects. So let me show you more details what we've done with the eDNA collection. So our idea here is to, as I said, stay very safely above the canopy. We don't want to take risk, but we have this winch, so we can lower this probe inside the canopy. And when the probe is entering the canopy, it's basically swabbing the vegetation with the probe, and this is allowing us to collect DNA. This basically takes everything that we learned before, but it makes it very, very simple and effective, so that can be deployed in the field. So we have this collection method that is based on swabbing or touching vegetation. We know that this is working. We have this sort of a force control system that detects when the probe is stuck and try to get it unstuck. And we also have we also optimize the shape and the size and the compliance of the probe, so we can maximize the chance of the probe of penetrating inside the vegetation and not getting stuck. And now the system is it's now quite, I would say, field ready, and is actually becoming a startup. So my students are working on it to make it as a product. It's called NAMU, and it will be used for biodiversity assessment in forests, but we're also targeting more agricultural application, especially for pest detection, for early intervention to minimize crop loss and damages. Now, before concluding, I would like also to show you the video of all our team effort in Singapore, which I think is pretty interesting. I'll give you a good idea also of also the other aspects of the competition, because it's not only about collecting data, but it's also all this processing of data, which is also extremely challenging and exciting. So this is when we arrived in Singapore, and it was also actually the first time that we met all together, so like 30 people coming together, so it was very nice to meet each other and to start planning. This is the secondary rainforest that where we sampled in Singapore. It was very tough at the beginning because Singapore has very tight flight regulations, so we need to certify all our drones to fly in Singapore. It was very demanding. So this is actually the competition. So these 24 hours of data collection, we operate during day but also during night in complete darkness. It was pretty exciting to do this. And here you see some of the other drones as well, these perching drones, and then the rover operating in the field. So this is all the eDNA analysis. So normally eDNA analysis is done in a lab. So here everything was done in the field with different field technologies that have been developed by also some startups that are collaborating with us, and of course by our team members. And then the last thing that we did is also to have what we called citizen scientists. So we're really experts from all over the world that helped us to associate species to the images and the sounds that we detected. And well, we had also to deliver 60-page reports in these 48 hours. And yeah, we basically detected around I think 200 species. But we managed only to analyze 1% of the eDNA because we crashed the computer for the analysis. So actually we have a good margin of improvement, and so this is what we are also optimizing. That's what happened when you work in the field, and yeah, in 72 hours under a lot of pressure and time constraint. So. Now to conclude, so I think that this field of robotics, I call it environmental robotics, but it has also several names. It's climate robotics or sustainability robotics. If you look at what other colleagues are also doing, I think it's very relevant. It's timely because when you think about the challenges of sustainability, climate change, and biodiversity declining, which is what we are mostly active in, really it needs to boost our capacity to measure the planet, to collect very accurate data sets in order to plan, to generate knowledge, and to basically plan very targeted interventions so that we can protect, we can manage, and also we can, of course, restore nature and our environment. And the role of robots is very important because it really helps us to make all these solutions, both in terms of data collection, but also actions and deployment, more efficient, scalable, and cost-effective. Of course, what I focused today was mostly these aspects of biodiversity monitoring, but there is a large work also in agriculture for sustainable food production, early detection of pests or diseases to have more targeted and sustainable intervention. Very interesting works also ongoing in terms of manipulation for recycling. A lot of work now with batteries in cars, but also with cleaning, for example, solar panels, and also for maintenance of, for example, wind turbine, because these are all very important infrastructure for clean energy production, but needs to be maintained efficiently. And so robots will definitely play, I think, a very important role in this, what we really need, which is this transition to a more sustainable future. Now, this is not an easy field of robotics to work with, so we have learned some lesson here. So in general, multidisciplinarity here it's key. So in the sense that it's very important to understand the problem behind actually the robotic system, or in addition to the robotic system. So we collaborate a lot with, of course, ecologists, with environmental scientists, and for us understanding what is eDNA, how biodiversity monitoring is extremely important then to develop the right solution, because the risk is that otherwise, we develop a cool technology that is looking for a problem. Instead, what we want to do here is the opposite. We really want to understand the problem and then develop a solution that is really targeted for this. Surprisingly, what we're facing is a very high, let's say, we cope a lot with very little technology acceptance. So surprisingly, so the level of acceptance on using robots is still quite low. So I think we have to work a lot on that. So it's also a problem of really expectation, because sometimes we tend to oversell our machine. Instead, we need to be a bit more realistic of what we can achieve, which I think is still a lot. And the other important aspects that is relevant is data. So all these robots are actually collecting a lot of data. So who is owning this data? There's something very relevant, because what we notice very often is that we collect a lot of data, but then these are not processed by us, so we lose a bit the ownership. And this is kind of a challenging. So you really want to master the entire sort of pipelines from the collection up to the data analysis in order to give meaning of what we do. And another important aspect here is actually the engineering versus scientific work, because in academia we are very interested in operating into this area, so very low technology readiness level. So we develop very interesting prototype to develop to work on new scientific discoveries, but we also need to deploy our solution in the field. So this is we are working more in this domain, so it requires quite some engineering work actually to achieve these developments. And by the way, the expectation of the ecologist or our collaborator user is even higher, so it's almost like a product. And the challenge is that, of course, transitioning from here to here requires a lot of effort, requires to find a lot of funding, but is, of course, very much necessary to do if we want to have an impact beyond, of course, publication, really being able to deploy this system in the real world, which is actually what we need. One last thing, so if you are interested in this topic, we have actually launched a Climate Robotics Network, which is a very interesting communities that we are building. This is bridging academia with industries. We have startups, we have investors. We cover not only scientific topic, but also ethics in deploying these robots into the global south, because this is where these robots will be mostly used. So there is a lot of also ethical aspects to keep in mind. So we organize every year a summit. We had the first summit 1 month ago. You can find it online, and of course, feel free to join to also be updated on news, because we try to keep this very active and build a very diverse community interest in all this topic of robots and climate change and sustainability. So big thanks to my team. So they all, of course, make all this work. So they are an amazing teams, and of course, big thanks to my funding agency. And yeah, thanks a lot for the attention, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
So everybody, we're going to ask the questions in English, but if you need some help, we can translate it to Professor.
Hello.
Hello?
I'm going to ask a question about the robotics and the implications of having a autonomous aircraft. So how can you bridge the gap between having an operator control the aircraft and having the robot do the branch landing? And is that a button that the operator presses, or is this the aircraft knowing when it needs to act? Like, how is this work?
Okay, so you're asking about the level of autonomy that we have on the drone. So in this drone, in the landing drone, in the drone, we have sort of a hybrid approach. That's what we do. We teleoperate the drone, so the operator is flying the drone above the branch. We have a camera, so the operator can more or less position the drone, and then the landing it's autonomously. So the robot switch to this landing. So this is a bit of an hybrid solution that we decided to tackle because we thought that it would be interesting that our colleagues, maybe they have an interest to sample a very specific branch, so they tell us, okay, go there. And so we can fly the drone there with pretty easily, because teleoperation of drone it's good. And then the autonomy kicks in only for the complex task, which is this landing and also stabilization. But now, of course, we realize that, or at least for the competition, what we are aiming is a fully autonomous system, so that we just specify locations where we need to deploy the probe, and then the drone goes there, deploy the probe, so we have very limited human inputs.
Thank you.
Is working? Okay. Hello, Professor Mintchev. My name is Pedro. I really liked the lecture, the work, the team efforts, and successes that you've presented here at Sematron. I just find this combination of engineering, aerial robotics, and biology to be fascinating. But I've been wanting to ask you these two questions. Could you say there are significant advantages on using wheeled and legged robots over drones for the monitoring of natural environments? And the second one is, do you find it viable or efficient to fuse both types of systems for this very important task?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. So I think I'm focusing on drones mostly because that's my expertise. But in general, if I look, for example, at the competition, and we try different type of robots, and the idea was exactly to combine the strength of different systems. So what we do with aerial robots, we can of course cover large areas, but is also highly demanding from an energetic point of view. So we can collect data over these 100 hectares, but sort of only once at the time. Said, for example, with terrestrial robots, what we can do, we can deploy the robot. Maybe we cannot cover the 100 hectares, but we can leave it out over the night, so we can collect data for longer time. So ideally, it's very nice to combine both systems because you can exploit synergies and they're highly actually complementary. One, however, of the challenge that we find in the X Prize, and for the finals we will not use terrestrial robots, is that we don't know in advance the field of the competition. And so it's very unpredictable. So there are still some situation where terrestrial robot, especially wheeled robots, like robots of course is better, they cannot access. So this doesn't give us the certainty that we can deploy these machines. So that's why for the finals we will most rely on flying robots.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation and your very interesting job and work with your group. My name is Handel. I'm an electrical engineering student, but I have a lot of concern about environmental engineering too. But one of the concerns involving your job is biopiracy, because what you develop is very impressive, of course, but may be used by companies. In Brazil, we have the problem with biopiracy mainly in the Amazon rainforest. So how do your team intend to guarantee that what is being developed will not be used for this kind of works? And one of the ways is involve local partners. So if you have some local partner from some that remains or is from a place which has a tropical rainforest. For example, you are going to Amazonas now, so you do call someone from there. Yep. And the last question is, how noisy are these drones? Because the animals are not used to this kind of sound, so it may be a little bit mad or a little bit anxious with this kind of noisy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, the first question, it was two parts. So one is if we have partners here in Brazil, and the first part was about what?
About how to guarantee that the drones will not be used for biopiracy or kind of thing.
For biopiracy. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So well, that's of course it's a very big problem, because every technology that we use has a dual use potential. So if you see about drones, especially now, you see also very much in this current, unfortunately, wartime. And I think that basically what we are trying to do is mostly to work with local communities, so to be sure that these are deployed in a good way, possibly. And this is why also part of our effort and commitment with this climate robotics network is exactly to think about the ethics of these drones, no, to avoid all these problems. But I think that in the end, it always comes down to person, no, to the personal thing, and how people will use this technology. It's very hard. It's a very hard problem. So when it comes to partner, in Brazil, yes, of course we have partners. One of the actual goal of the X Prize is that this technology will also empower local communities to perform, for example, stewardship activities and to be rewarded for this and to develop new economy model. And actually, I'm not directly responsible for this, but one of our one of our team leads is actually collaborating with local communities in the Amazon. So we are helping them to deploy this solution. We are training them to use different type of system to monitor biodiversity. So they are integral part of our team. And we are also learning a lot from them. So how we need to monitor, what we have to monitor is an important knowledge that we integrate and we use to plan actually the deployment of our robots. So for example, there are specific tree species that are very important, and we prioritize in our data collection. The second question was about noise. It's a very good question. It's in general more problem of how animal reacts to drone. It's not only noise; it's also the shape of the drone that sometimes it's scary for them. The question is that the point is that there is no single let's say response from animal. Every animal reacts in a very different way. When we're doing tests in the zoo of Zurich to prepare for this competition, they have a very big dome with a rainforest. So we train there because we don't have access to rainforest in Switzerland, and we saw that some birds, they absolutely didn't care about our drones, while others were very aggressive and they were trying to shutting down. So what we do usually is when we deploy the robot in an environment, we work with our colleagues to be sure that we don't disturb too much the animal, and then we continue some sort of the deployment. So we always do some sort of an initial assessment of what is the impact of the drone, but it's very specific. So biodiversity is complex. The world is complex. So every time we need to do some form of preliminary assessment or calibration.
Hi, thanks for the lecture. Your work is very impressive and very important. I would like to know more about deep water biodiversity research, and I would like to know if your research or maybe your group's research reaches that area, and also if you have some book recommendations about the rainforest robots.
Deep water, is correct?
Yes, like
Yeah.
puts
Yeah, yeah. So
deep ocean, like very deep ocean.
So this is not something that we do directly, because I've done some work on underwater robots, but now it's probably quite a long time that we don't do this thing. But yeah, I mean that's definitely an interesting field, especially now, because there is a lot of interest in mining the oceans, and probably there is very little understanding of everything that is there, and the biome that is there. So what is really the damage that we could cause by start to mining and disturb these environments. So definitely there is a lot of interest in developing both sort of grippers that can operate at very high pressure. This is a group from in Harvard that is very active in this domain, and there is also a lot of potential in using environmental DNA to monitor species. So there are some development of autonomous sort of labs that you can mount inside these underwater rovers, so that it can go underwater, sample, but even analyze then the DNA directly. So it's a quite actually field that is very much in development. And then you want a recommendation for rainforest robots.
Yes.
It's complex. It's complex. I think what is for us, especially in the competition, the big complexity is it is the logistics, because we are really in the middle of nowhere. It's really kind of remote. So even like handling all the energy requirement, the battery, the charging, it is very tricky. So we are using these very large drones, and frankly speaking, I would have preferred to use. So these are basically 6 kilo drones that use 4 kilo batteries, and yeah, you need tons of these batteries. So you need to carry maybe 30 or 40 kilo of batteries in the middle of the jungle. I would like to have actually smaller drones. So this is actually one of the next, I think, challenge that we have to face. So how we can miniaturize these drones while ensuring the same capacity to collect data.
Sorry, I think I misspoke. I wanted some book recommendations, like articles or something.
Book? Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. In terms of rainforest, or in terms of robots?
The rainforest robots. Like, what did you use for your research?
Okay. Well, I think there is no really book about robots in the rainforest. There are a lot of book on like how, for example, to monitor and to survey biodiversity. And this is what actually we kind of study, or we kind of explore in order to develop or automate these methods. And I can give you some reference. I can search.
Thanks.
Good morning, Professor. Here.
Sorry.
Thank you for coming here and showing us your project. I would like to ask a little bit more about how did you analyze all this data that you obtained? You say that in this competition you needed to analyze in 72 hours all this data. And I would like to ask about AI programs that you say that your team used, and how did you manage to analyze all that in this short space of time?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I didn't cover it because it's not my main task in the team, luckily, because it's a very complex task as well. So as you can see, we have basically a stream of data that is composed by images, by sounds, and by DNA, eDNA. So images and sound, we basically process them using AI algorithm. And the challenge is not, the challenge is mainly the training of this algorithm and to create the database, actually, because a lot of species in the rainforest, they are not known. So you can't really label this data very effectively. So this is the challenge that we are tackling right now. So we are actually, and that's why we work with local communities. So they're helping us in collecting this data, and with their knowledge, we are building this database, and then we're using to train the algorithms, the AI, the machine learning algorithm. And then for the eDNA, we are partnering with companies that are developing portable machines to very rapidly analyze this eDNA in the field. So one of the critical steps of the eDNA is called PCR, which is basically you put very little DNA and then you perform this process and you multiply this DNA so you can actually analyze it. This is a process that takes a long time, usually, but we have a company that managed to speed up, has a machine to speed up, so this is what allows us actually to do this process in 72 hours and not taking months into the system. But yeah, it's a very complex process doing also all these analysis.
And could you say too about what programs did you use about AI mainly to analyze all this data? Like the type of AI.
So I don't know the details of that because it's mostly my colleague, but definitely what we are trying to do now is to run everything online, everything directly on the laptop. So we don't rely on any sort of a cloud system because we really have to be portable and be able to operate remotely. But actually, if you are interested, then after I can give you some more information because we are organizing. Actually, my colleague organized an hackathon for students to develop all this process. So I'm sure there you can find more information.
Hi. Hi, good morning. My name is Abreu. Firstly, I just wanted to say thanks for your visit here for Sematron and for your lecture. It was really inspiring and really interesting as well. I just want to ask for you about the development of your robot, the drone, because as you show us, there's a lot of obstacles and factors can affect the drone as the environment, the wild animals and obstacles, etc. In your opinion, which one of the challenges that you and your team which one of the challenges that you and your team needs to go through to resolve this type of problems?
The challenge that we have to deal with deploying this thing in the rainforest, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the challenge, the main challenge that we have been facing is, so we have to do things in a very short time. So we really need to be sure. So 24 hours seems long time, but it's actually very short. It's because there is night in between, so there is 12 hours of complete dark, basically. And so I think the main problem is to really have a system, a robotic system that you press a button and you are sure that it is working, which is not always the case. So having really a system that is highly reliable, that is very well tested. So this is where actually we put most of the effort for this competition, because we really want to get there and be sure that the system works and not spending time in debugging it. So this is one of the where we put most of the energy, let's say, especially in this last year of developing. So everything must be optimized, and also planning which robot you send first, and then how to handle the data when they come back. So it's really kind of everything needs to be really, really streamlined tested.
Okay, thank you.
Stefano. Okay, thanks for the presentation. It was very intriguing. Just making a parallel in the photonics area, sometimes we want to have a material, we have a shape that maximize the light propagation for any purpose. And in the past, they used to do this in a more intuitive way, but today they're using machine learning and deep learning algorithms to make a very complex shape architecture, which is non-intuitive but very efficient. Yeah. So I was wondering if it could be somehow used in those bioinspired separated flow wings you mentioned for efficient drones, something like that.
Yeah. So if I understand correctly, the question is about like the use of AI also in the design process of these machines. Yeah. So it's a very good question. So I haven't shown anything of that because we just started a project, very big EU project, so in collaboration with many universities in Europe, about the development of actually co-evolution of body and brain of soft area robots. And this is exactly this idea about not only sort of using AI or evolutionary algorithms to develop the body, but simultaneously also building the controller so that the things are really tightly connected together. So it's definitely something that it's very interesting and that we are gradually looking more and more interested. The reason is also because when you start to develop a soft robot or soft system, you have so many degrees of freedom, you have so many parameters that it's very hard for a designer to really, understand what and how to optimize the system. So this is where AI or evolutionary algorithms help us to really explore this space probably in a more efficient way and come up with better morphologies that us as a human we would not be able to find.
Perfect, thanks.
And for the last question.
Thank you for the presentation. And about the branch traversing robots, how do you choose what branch are you going to push? Do you go by the thickness? Do you have an algorithm for that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Actually, it's something that it's a bit the problem here that we are facing now, since the system that we have right now is only able to measure the total force that is coming from the different from the force that is applied by the different obstacles. We cannot really understand which obstacle is more compliant than the other because we measure only the resulting force. And so our goal here is to actually transition to a system that is able to monitor multiple contacts at the time, so we can understand possibly which obstacle is more compliant and potentially move towards this obstacle. So for the robot to traverse obstacles that are kind of softer and can be pushed away more easily.
So the trajectory, the path that the robot will fall, will be decided on time during the flight and during the feeling of the forces.
Yes, in principle, yes. So based on what is the measure of stiffness or of compliance or of softness on the environment, we could basically try to develop some sort of a traversability estimation of a specific region or a specific obstacle and potentially replan the path of the robot towards this region. And this is something that we don't do here, because here what we do, we just ask the robot to move straight, but eventually it will get stuck if the obstacle is too compliant. So this is one of the limitations that we are trying to address.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for the questions. Unfortunately, our time has run out, but we still have a little minutes left to do some books. The giveaway. Então